All right, everyone. Well, hello and welcome to Bridging the Gap. Thanks for joining us. Bridging the Gap is programming that provides a platform to share experiences, knowledge, and insight around diversity and inclusion and its depth. I'm Mike Lovins, one of the members of the Diversity Dialogue Committee, which is the volunteer group that develops topics for this event. You're in for a treat. We are going to hear from representatives from 3 museums and cultural institutions in Ohio. Let's get started with moderator Lynn Stevens. Take it away.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce our 3 speakers, give some background information on them. First, Dr. Charles Wash. He's the director of the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center in Wilberforce, which is a division of the Ohio History Connection. He earned a MA and a Master's of Arts and a PhD from Howard University in Afro-Latin American, Caribbean, and African diaspora history, and has worked in many areas in public history. Dr. Walsh's duties as a director, aside from his duties as a director, he is also part of a leadership structure of the Ohio History Connection when he's not engaged in his duties within OHC. Dr. Walsh is also an adjunct professor in history at Central State University, where he steers minority students into history and museum fields. Mr. Javon Collins is the Performing Arts Program Director at the King Arts Complex in Columbus, Ohio. His main duties include developing, organizing, and facilitating all performing arts programming. A native of Columbus, Javon earned a Bachelor of Science in Human Ecology from the Ohio State University and worked as a student assistant at the Wexner Center for Arts. He received a scholarship to attend the Ohio State University via the Young Scholars Program at age 11. He served as a panelist for the National Endowment for the Arts, the Ohio Arts Council, the Cuyahoga Arts Council, and he currently serves as interim president for the Ohio State University Black Alumni Society, Board of Governors, and a Board of Directors. He served on the Board of Directors for the National Performance Network and the Ohio State University College of Arts and Science Town and Gown Committee. He's a founding member of the Next Gen National Arts Network and the Columbus Artists Networks. Mr. Collins enjoys spending time with his wife and family, as well as calisthenics, design, literature, and music. And Superintendent Robert Stewart, I did not get your bio. Would you mind saying a few remarks about yourself and your background? This is Superintendent Stewart.
Okay, I'm Robert Stewart. I'm the superintendent here at the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument. My undergrad degree in history and secondary education was from Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland, as well as my master's degree in human services administration with a concentration in special education was from the University of Baltimore and Coppin State University's collaborative program. I've been here in Ohio since 2016 when I came here to the site to be the original director of interpretation for the park, and I was able to move into the superintendent position. Before this, I worked at the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site, Tuskegee Institute National Historic Site, as well as the Selma to Montgomery Trail, and Fort McHenry in Baltimore, as well as Hampton National Historical Site. Thanks for having me here today.
We'll make sure. So thank you all, Lynn, Victoria, the whole team there. I really appreciate the invitation to speak with you all today. This is, again, part of what we do, not just during Black History Month, but all year round, is to share information about what we do as a museum, how we share, preserve, and interpret information as it relates to African-American history and culture. This is our passion. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. So again, my name is Dr. Chuck Wash. I've been director of our museum, which is a part of the Ohio History Connection. We are a division and a site. But I've been there for 10 years as director, and 2 years prior to that, I was there as the archivist as well. So I'm like really heavily into collections. I'm into hands-on. I really want the public to really see what types of artifacts, what types of archival collections, things that we have for the betterment of just society in general. So that's kind of where my mindset is. It always starts with collection. So let me advance this. Hopefully this works. Excuse me for any delay in this. I'm just now getting used to the this program. So this is just a real quick image of our museum. I don't know if anyone has ever come out from Department of Transportation that made their way out to Wilberforce, but this is just a quick image of our museum. We are currently in our 34th year of operation right now. Really happy with our transition over the last 10 years that I've been director. We're trying to do things a lot differently than before, really update some of our programming, exhibition work, which I'll talk about. I want to start with our location in Wilberforce. We are actually located on the original grounds of Wilberforce University. If anyone's familiar with Wilberforce University, you know that it is the third oldest HBCU in existence, one of three that was actually created before 1865. So we're literally located on these hallowed grounds there in Wilberforce, very historic, and it's something we take very seriously, very proud of our history. This image in particular is one of the oldest renditions of the original university that dates back to 1857. So it's kind of a history that we feel like we're the custodians of. So our museum is dedicated to African American history and culture, obviously. It came out of this time period in US history that was right after the Civil Rights Movement, right? We had a bunch of wins, the Civil Rights Acts of 1865, 1965, 1968, and kind of at the tail end of the Black Panther movement or the Black Power movement, where there was this national call for a national African-American museum. Prior to our opening in 1988, there did not exist anywhere in the United States a national museum dedicated to African-American history and culture. So citizens around the country, in particular here in Ohio, took up that call and really began to push for the creation of such a museum. Ohio residents in particular really thought it would be important to have that museum, that national museum here in the state of Ohio, and have it located in historic Wilberforce, Ohio. So this really started off this long and often controversial, as you could imagine, between the state of Ohio and Congress, this kind of a debate between whether or not there should exist a National Museum of African American History and where it should be located, especially in Wilberforce, because people around the country didn't really realize just how historic Wilberforce was and how of a cornerstone, I think you could say, that it is of African American history and culture in the U.S. So either way, by the time we get to the mid-1980s, there's a feasibility study going, and they authorized the construction of that National Museum in Wilberforce. So to sort of fast forward just a little bit, we opened our doors to the public on April 16th, 1988. And we had what we called back then, was a permanent exhibit that we titled From Victory to Freedom, Afro-American Life in the 50s, in the 1950s. That exhibit actually covered African-American history from about the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 all the way through the Civil Rights Act of 1965. So it was a kind of a 1950s, 1960s theme, even though it says Afro-American life in the 1950s. It opened with rave reviews, right? This was really the first of its kind anywhere in the nation. And we had people come in from all over the United States to help with the opening and to see the exhibits that we had on display. Harry Belafonte, for example, he performed at our opening. It was just a lot of who's who in African American history that were connected to the opening. So our museum is actually a fully functional collecting museum. And what that means is we don't just create and display exhibitions to the public. We actually we display some of the archival collections that we have because we collect, we preserve, and we share that information. So we have lots of artifacts, in particular, a world-class, at least those are my words, it's a world-class archival collection where you can find material from the late 18th century all the way through the present, documenting just about every aspect of African-American history and culture in the United States. But also it's connected also to some of the international stories as well. A part of our collection, our archival collection that is the history of Wilberforce University, obviously, but also its connection with other themes within African-American history and culture. So for example, this slide talks about the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. Some of you may know a little bit about this because it was in a movie, a very famous Hollywood movie called Glory, starring just like so many people. Denzel Washington was in it, just so many people. I don't want to get into all of that, but people forget that that 54th Massachusetts Regiment, how important it was on the attack of Fort Wagner in South Carolina, that a lot of those volunteers in there weren't just from the state of Ohio, but they were from Wilberforce University. Those were college students, a lot of them. We have the actual roster of those that participated in the 54th Massachusetts, especially at Fort Wagner. But if we think about that, it just shows you the power of that African-American history and that culture of wanting to continue a legacy of proving their importance in American history. So again, when I think back to that, like if I was an undergraduate college student, would I volunteer to go to war knowing that I may not see the next day, fighting for something greater than myself? That was an enormous sacrifice, and it just goes to show you the depth of the character those students had. This is an image from our archival collection depicting that attack at Fort Wagner with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. Another part of our collection, and I know Superintendent Stewart is going to talk about this as well, going in much more detail than I am. But a part of our archival collection that we really, really love, it's a cornerstone really of what we do in sharing African-American history and culture, is the Colonel Charles Young collection. We actually have 4 different collections, but combined we have probably the most extensive collection of Charles Young material that exists anywhere, which is why we work so closely with Superintendent Stewart and his staff, because they're sort of the ones who share all of this with the broader public. We have collected the material, we preserve the material, but they kind of tell the story, they display that. So we work in tandem with that. But we're very proud of what Colonel Young has meant to not just the state of Ohio, not just Wilberforce, but just the African-American history and culture, and how he projected that throughout the world. It wasn't just in the United States, it was all over the world. So that's one of the collections that we really cherish. And our archival collection is also shared with researchers from all over the world. This is just an image of a researcher who came through a few years ago, wrote an entire book on the life of Anna Arnold Hedgeman. The bulk of her research was done right there in our archives in Wilberforce. And this is an image of her doing some extensive research right there in the archive itself. She is a professor of gender and women's studies, and I believe she is the dean of academic affairs there in Maine. So just an example of what we do. So that's an archival side of things. We also have 3-dimensional artifacts, very extensive collection that we share with as many people around the world as possible. We actually loan artifacts from coast to coast here in the United States. These are just a couple of examples. When you look at MoMA, for example, the Museum of Modern Art, excuse me, that's in New York, if you guys have ever been there. The Hammer Museum is in Los Angeles. And right there, the National Museum of African American History and Culture is a relatively new African American museum that the Smithsonian built right there in Washington, D.C. We've loaned art to all of those institutions and many more. Those are just a couple of examples. But again, it doesn't stop with just what we do here in the United States. We loan artifacts around the world. The Tate Museum, for example, that's a really well-established museum in London, England. Musée du Quai Branly is in Paris, France. We've loaned a lot of material to both museums. Just a few years ago, even before the COVID outbreak, we were in conversation with a museum in Moscow to loan a few artifacts depicting African-American history and culture. That was a big deal that they wanted to really share with the public in Russia. Obviously, that didn't happen, and now with all of the events going on now, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pick up that conversation anytime soon. But it just goes to show the power of not just the collections that we have here in the state of Ohio, but how important African-American culture is and has been around the world. So aside from collections, obviously I told you guys I come from the collection side of things. We do a lot of public programming, a lot of engaging the public directly. So this is just an image of one of many programs we've had there in Wilberforce, but we also do programming all over the state of Ohio. Like I said, we work with Superintendent Stewart a lot. We have conversations with them and his staff all the time, but also King Arts Complex. You guys are going to hear from Mr. Collins as well. We've done some programming, joint programming with them, and hope to do a lot more moving forward. But since the outbreak of COVID, we've done a lot more webinars, things online. For example, just last week, we did a collaborative webinar with COSI right here in Columbus, where we were talking about Black comic creators. We have an excellent exhibition I'll mention in just a minute, detailing the history of Black characters and Black comic creators throughout the history of comic books from the late 19th century going into the 20th, 21st century. It was a wonderful program. A couple thousand people logged in to hear the panel discussion. So we do a lot of work online and in person around the state. This is an image of one exhibition we did a couple years ago, right before COVID as well. It's called Ohio Diaspora. The kind of collections from our art in Wilberforce. We did this at the Rife Gallery right there downtown Columbus. Had a lot of artists from all over the state of Ohio. I'm not sure if you guys can recognize anyone in this image here, but you have some of the most influential African-American artists who have ever come out of the state of Ohio, who are still alive. If Amina Robinson was still alive, she would be a part of this as well. Kojo Kamal, if he was still with us, he would be in this picture as well. Bing Davis is there. I'm not sure if you guys recognize him. It's just so important to keep up with those artists that we're living with in this moment. And I know Mr. Collins probably can name everyone in this picture as well. But this is just another part of what we do with our exhibitions. Behind the Mask, Black Power in Comics, this is the exhibit I just mentioned, detailing the history of African Americans in not just the comic books themselves, but behind the scenes creating the comics. So if you guys are anywhere near Wilberforce, you may want to come out, pay us a visit, take a look at this exhibition, along with everything else. It's really powerful. Excuse me, Art of Soul is our annual juried art show. We actually just closed this year's rendition of Art of Soul this past weekend on Saturday. So we're ramping up to get the other one, the next iteration of this going this coming fall. But this is a national juried art show. We had artists in this year's show who came from as far away as the U.S. Virgin Islands, other parts of the Caribbean, but definitely coast to coast in the United States. A couple of people who won prizes and awards, they were from New York and from Los Angeles, respectively. It was a tremendous show. We're very happy with the turnout, and every year it grows. So we want to remain engaged, not just with the public here in Ohio, but across the nation as well. And one of the last examples I give you guys of some of the exhibition work we do is Queens of the Heartland. This is one of our newer exhibitions. This focuses on 30 African-American women with Ohio ties. Some of them are born and raised here in the state of Ohio. Some of them simply made Ohio their home as adults. but all 30 are connected with other women and other organizations across the country. So this exhibit sort of ties all these African-American women who, some of them, most people would know about, but a lot of people have never heard of them. But when you see their connections to all these other women and all these other movements across the country, you'll start to look at Ohio a little bit differently. It's kind of like, if these women are here in Ohio, but they're connected to these national, sometimes international movements, it's like, why don't we talk about them more? Why aren't they required reading, I don't know, in high school or something like that? Because these women were phenomenal. We settled on 30 from a list of close to 90, and now we're kind of looking at it in terms of, should we have a second and maybe even a third iteration of this, because it's just that important. So again, our museum, we're celebrating 34 years of operations. We're trying to engage the public as much as humanly possible, not just in the Wilberforce area or just Miami Valley, but across the state. We're doing more and more work in and around Columbus. Again, we want to continue to connect with the Lincoln Theater, connect with Mr. Collins and the King Arts Complex. We're helping to build new museums in Columbus as well. Poindexter Village is one of the museums that my division we're working on. That's going to be really important in detailing African-American history in the Near East Side. So we're going to bring everybody together and continue to work towards bringing people in the fold of understanding or better understanding African-American history and culture. So with that, I will end my presentation. And I appreciate again, Lynn and your entire team for the invitation to speak to you all today.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Thank you, Dr. Wash. All righty. And next, if we don't mind, we'll stay in Wilberforce, if you don't mind. Superintendent Robert Stewart, would you like to launch your PowerPoint and begin your presentation? Thank you.
Superintendent Stewart, if you could check your audio, I believe you might have yourself currently muted. Okay. It says you're self-muted currently. You'll have to, there we go. Try it again.
All right.
We can hear you now, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. So I'm getting ready to share my screen. And all right, do you guys see the Colonel Charles Young?
We do not. We're just seeing the desktop of your computer. So under the sharing section of the GoToWebinar, under the show button, if you could click there and select the PowerPoint. There we go. We see it now. Looks wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hello. Once again, I'm Robert Stewart. I'm the superintendent of the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument, located right here in Wilberforce, Ohio. As previously stated, we are right down the road from the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center, and we share a lot of resources that they have as far as Colonel Young's life and legacy. So let's get started. Colonel Charles Young was our nation's first African-American colonel in the United States Army, but he was born in Mays Lick, Kentucky on March 12, 1864, during the American Civil War. As you see, the cabin that is on the screen right now is his birth cabin that's still standing in Mason County in Mays Lick. That's where he was born and spent the first upwards to about 9 months of his life before relocating with his family over to Ripley, Ohio, where he grew up. His father, Mr. Gabriel Young, fought in the Civil War as a USCT, or United States Colored Troop, with the 5th U.S. Heavy Artillery out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And yes, that was a picture of Colonel Charles Young as a baby. But he grew up in Ripley, Ohio. As you see, it was a city, well, it is a city right on the Ohio River, where many people who were seeking freedom would cross over from Kentucky into Ohio as a way of getting away from slavery. We have the John Parker House, which is down in the lower right-hand corner. That home is a place where Colonel Young spent many hours reading and learning how becoming a better student and becoming a great student as he was when he was going to school in Ripley. On the picture in the middle of the top center of this slide is the John Rankin House. John Rankin was a Presbyterian minister who helped as many as 3,000 people escape from slavery to freedom. He had upwards of about 12 children, and all of the family members took part in ushering people away from the state line of Ohio, where their home is located, all the way up to further up into Ohio and further up north into Canada. After leaving from Ripley, Ohio, Colonel Young went to the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was the 9th African American to enter, but 3rd to graduate. Colonel Young was someone that was able to make the best out of any situation that was thrown at him. When Colonel Young was at West Point, he was ostracized. No one spoke to him unless they absolutely had to. He was still able to make something out of that opportunity. Notice I said opportunity. No one spoke to him, so he found people that would speak to him. When the folks who spoke English didn't want to talk to him, he found people who spoke French and German, the French cook and the German maid, that would speak to him. By the time Colonel Young left from United States Military Academy at West Point, he was fluent in French and German. He went on to speak about 8 languages throughout his life. Once again, a 3rd African American to graduate from the Military Academy at West Point after Henry O. Sane Flipper, who graduated in 1877, and John Hanks Alexander, who graduated in 1887. Colonel Young was in a very interesting place. He was a Buffalo soldier. He was a first sergeant to the 25th Infantry, but then went on to serve with the 9th and 10th Cavalry. He was someone who had to adjust at all times. He was African American, but he couldn't socialize with the Buffalo soldiers, with the rest of them, because he had to lead them, and he couldn't be too friendly or too familiar. He was a military officer, but because of the way of keeping things separated because of race, he couldn't socialize with the other military officers. So he had to really center himself and focus at all times on everything that he was doing. One of my favorite pictures of Colonel Young is the one that's on the screen right now. He's surrounded by many other military officers, but he's the only African American in that picture as part of the regular army at the time, and he definitely stands out. But even though he had all the things of racial tensions and things that were on him, he still always put his best foot forward, and he focused on the long-term goals that were ahead of him. He was a professor of military science and tactics at Wilberforce University. That's why he came here in 1894. He not only started the program that became the Marauder Battalion, ROTC, that's still in existence to this very day. He also started the Wilberforce Band, and he also taught foreign languages on the campus itself. The picture in the center here at the bottom is Colonel Young with his ROTC students on the campus. The thing about Colonel Young, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later on, is that his students saw both sides of him. His soldiers always said that he was a rough and tough commander, He was always on their backs. He told them when to get up, when to go to sleep, when to work, when to not work, when to think, anything. His students also said that he was a very firm teacher. He assigned the most work, but on weekends, he would invite them over on his front porch for cocoa and to basically talk to them as students and as people who were in college at that time. His time at Wilberforce made him a pillar of the community. He really loved this place, and no matter where he traveled throughout the world, he always considered Wilberforce his home. I'm proud to say that I'm following in Colonel Young's footsteps, however, on the National Park Service side. He was the first African-American superintendent when he was the acting superintendent at Sequoia and General Grant National Park, now known as Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park, located in California, where some of the world's largest trees are located. In fact, the General Sherman tree, which every time you look up Sequoia, you'll see that tree pop up. The first person to put a fence around that tree to preserve it was Colonel Charles Young. Him and his troopers created the old route, which is still in existence to this very day in 1903. And he did more in the summer that he was there than 3 previous administrations combined, creating a route that will allow people to get from the giant forest up to the Morro Rock, which is a big, huge a stone mountain out there in California at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. Colonel Young really took this job seriously. He was able to work with members of the community to galvanize troops and also civilian workers together so that they could create this several mile long trail that lets people go up to the large forest, large trees at Sequoia. He's also a recipient of the NAACP Spingarn Medal in 1916 for the work that he did in both Haiti and Liberia. He also was the very first African-American military attaché, so once again to both the islands of Haiti and also to the country of Liberia. He was able to develop infrastructure roads, also to map the island of Liberia as island of Hispaniola, of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, also to provide infrastructure to the country of Liberia. Some of Colonel Young's maps were made, and they're so accurate they can still be tracked and used to this day. He was a pioneering member of the United States Military Intelligence Department. And there's an image of Colonel Young here during his time in Liberia with his wife, Miss Ada Mills Young. You see his father, Mr. Gabriel Young, who was once again a soldier in the United States Colored Troops during the American Civil War. But you also see his mother, Miss Arminta Young, who was also educated from the time of slavery. Miss Arminta Young instilled in Colonel Young the importance of education, and his father also instilled in him the importance of being a soldier and also how to be a horseman. Those two things combined to make Colonel Young an amazing military officer, cavalry officer. You see Colonel Young with you see a picture of W.B. Du Bois as well as Paul Laurence Dunbar, which these two men were very close friends of Colonel Young. Colonel Young with his family in the top right-hand corner, you see him with his daughter, Miss Marie Aurelia Young, and his son, Charles Noel Young. You also see Colonel Young on his front porch, greeting family, friends, and also former Buffalo soldiers, Mr. Samuel B. Pearson. A lot of folks tell us that picture looks just like FDR, but that's about 20 years too soon for it to be FDR. That's Samuel B. Pearson. He did see action overseas during the Philippine-American War, also during the punitive expedition down into Mexico after Pancho Villa. He also was someone who was able to make peace everywhere he went. It's interesting, during his time out of Fort Robinson and Fort Duchesne during the War of the Plains, Colonel Young was able to create a peace between the different Native American nations and also the U.S. cavalry and infantry that was stationed at those bases. He understood people. He understood how to adjust during times of conflict, but also to try to preserve and create a peace. That's something that he passed on to his students that went on to become military officers, and also to people that he came in contact with as well. For reading through many of his classmates' records, who are also at the National Afro-American Museum, that they talk about Colonel Young, or Cadet Young at the time. They talk about how he was someone that no matter what happened or came or circumstances that took place, he always tried to see the best out of it and always rose to every single occasion. Rather, if he was getting extra demerits for various reasons, or actually having to repeat his plebe year, he was always able to focus on selfless performance, duty to country, and physical and moral courage at all times. Colonel Young passed away 100 years ago this year. In fact, earlier this year, we had a special 100 commemoration of the passing of Colonel Young. He passed away while overseas in Nigeria, while he was assigned as military attaché to Liberia. After about a year, he was then reinterred at Arlington National Cemetery in 1923. He is now there with his wife, Ms. Ada Mills Young, who passed away some time after him. Colonel Young's legacy still lives on today at the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument, but also in the generations of people that he inspired. We are the 401st National Park out of 423 units across our nation. And we tell the story of not only Colonel Charles Young, but the Buffalo Soldiers, who served our country with honor and distinction from 1866 all the way up until 1952. Yes, the military was desegregated in 1947, but the last armed services group that to be desegregated happened in 1952. And that legacy still lives on today. In fact, one of our most senior volunteers at the park is a 98-year-old Buffalo soldier who still lives right here in our community. Now, we can't do all this stuff on our own. We have partners such as the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Wilberforce University, Central State University, United States Army, the National Park Foundation, and many other volunteers and also service groups to help us to preserve this history. The Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument, once again, is the 401st National Park, but we are going through a major renovation. Currently, the home is going through a demolition phase. So if you ever were to drive by the site, you would basically see that the house is being taken apart. We are scheduled to reopen back in next year, around March of next year, to be able to house visitors as well as do programs and presentations. We are currently working out of Payne Theological Seminary, which is right around the corner from us as a park. And basically, we're still open for visitors, and we're still doing things, posting information online, as well as through social media as well. Let's see. All right, can you guys see me?
Thank you very
Awesome.
much, Superintendent Stewart. Very informative. Very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, next we will move to Columbus, the capital city. If Mr. Javon Collins of the King Arts Complex. Let's see, are we sharing your PowerPoint, Mr. Collins, or you? Okay, great. Thanks.
Everyone can see the screen. We're good.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We just don't see it in full,
Okay.
screen
I
view.
got you. There we go.
Looks great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much, and good afternoon. I want to thank ODOT for this opportunity. My name is Javon Collins, the Performing Arts Director of the King Arts Complex. Some of you may have heard my intro. I've been an employee at the King Arts Complex for nearly 16 years. And as you may have heard in the intro, I got my scholarship to go to the Ohio State University at age 11 at the King Arts Complex. I'd like to also thank my fellow panelists, Dr. Walsh and Superintendent Stewart. Thank you for all that great information. I look forward to partnering with you both in the future. I want to start off by acknowledging that the King Arts Complex is located on the traditional homeland of the Miami, Shawnee, Wyandotte, and other indigenous nations. But as we start, that is the King Arts Complex. That is our logo. We'll be celebrating 35 years of connecting the community through arts. And we've been doing that since March. We actually got one more day. So since March of 1987. So we're really excited about our 35th anniversary. As we continue on, as you see, that's me in this program, or actually this presentation. I talk about Columbus and my connection to it and why I'm just so honored to serve in my role at the King Arts Complex. For those of you who are not familiar, Columbus has grown exponentially, especially in my lifetime. You see the demographics there. So comparison to a lot of larger cities, the percentage of African Americans here in the city is quite high compared to some other cities. This is a map of Columbus because we're talking about the history. So here in Columbus, there was a lot of redlined areas. So that kind of led to a lot of situations where even our Columbus city schools really had to desegregate and create a busing plan back in the mid-1970s to create some equity and equality within the school system. But the redlining kind of created that issue. And here we are nearly 40 years later, still trying to figure out how we move forward, because students who live near the King Arts Complex are bused cross town. So we're trying to figure out how to get more of those students in their neighborhood schools, because neighborhood school for King Arts Complex is East High School. There may be some East High Tigers on the call, but this is a great school and they still have such a great tradition. So we're happy to serve the King Lincoln District and the entirety of Columbus, Ohio. As we move forward, we talk about the Black history of Columbus. You know, originally the vast majority of Blacks in Columbus descended from slaves who came from the Carolinas and Virginia in the 1800s. Excuse me. It is estimated that there were only 43 free colored in Columbus prior to the Civil War. Ohio was considered a free state, a designation indicating only that its residents could not own slaves. Ohio afforded African Americans few, if any, political rights. Let's keep it going. By the mid-1920s, Mount Vernon Avenue, and that's where the King Arts Complex is located, was firmly, excuse me, let me get this screen out of here so I can continue to read, sorry. Was firmly established as the center of African American life in Columbus. This handsome building was erected for use as a lodge and theater for the community's residents, and that was the historic Pythian Theater. As of now, we do not operate in the Pythian Theater. We operate in the former Garfield Elementary School. But back in the day, entertainment such as from Cab Calloway, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and the Cotton Club Dancers. So it's so great at the Pythian Theater on the 4th floor. A lot of those, you know, great talented artists would sign the boards and things of that nature. But that was back in the day. Moving forward, the start of the King Arts Complex. And of course, we're named after the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But it really stretches back to 1968. For those of you maybe from Columbus, you may have heard of the Dunbar Center that was in operation in the late 60s and early 70s. But that center, the Paul Lawrence Dunbar Cultural Arts Center, was created by CAMACO, which is a community action organization. And Leonard Napper was the first executive director and was based in the facilities that were formerly the Columbus Boys Academy. The Dunbar Center offered so many great programs and really was the precursor for the King Arts Complex. But unfortunately, due to a series of fires, the Dunbar Center had to close. And originally, some of you may be familiar with the Lincoln Theater. Back in the mid-70s, they were looking to renovate and relocate the Dunbar Center, but it didn't happen. And really, Columbus was without a cultural arts center for over a decade. So that is our entrance. And as I stated, we opened up in March of 1987, but it didn't really start, as I said, in 68, what happened with the Dunbar Center leading up to the early 80s, a lot of efforts to rename streets after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Originally, Long Street, which is a major street near downtown in the east side of Columbus, was renamed Martin Luther King Boulevard. But luckily, the city council at City Hall with the great Jerry Hammond had a contingency in place in which they renamed a stretch near going towards Mount Vernon Avenue, Martin Luther King Boulevard. And the cool thing about that is it's really, the street actually has a park by the name of Mamie Moore Park. And Mamie Moore was the grandmother of Otto Beatty Jr. Esquire, who was the husband of Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. And there's the Beatty Pavilion, but the fact that you have Mamie Moore Park on Dr. King Boulevard is great because anytime Dr. King came to Columbus, he would visit with Mamie Moore. Here you see the Amos Lynch Plaza. Amos Lynch was basically given the name the Godfather. He read in the Call and Post newspaper and was all about putting out positive information of the Black community in Columbus, Ohio. In this space is an outdoor facility in which we have events.
It appears Mr. Collins is having some technical difficulties at this moment. Lynn, while Mr. Collins is trying to recover, do you want to come on and maybe start asking some questions of the presenters who already spoke?
Yes, and if anyone in the audience has any questions, burning questions, feel free to type them into the questions box on the screen. Dr. Charles Wash, I have visited the museum there a few times over my career. I'm just wondering, what are your hours of operation? Dr. Wash, are you still there? Yeah. If you can.
Yes, our hours of operation. So we're open to the public Wednesday through Saturday from 9 to 4 p.m. Sometimes we may have a special program or event where we're open on other days, but typically it's Wednesday through Saturday, 9 to 4.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Superintendent Stewart, I've been to the Charles Young home there before the renovations and demolition there. Could you just talk about a little bit about the sponsorship, the move to get it, you know, as a monument there with the National Park Service, who was instrumental in making that happen, or seeing that process actually began to be considered for a national monument?
Yes, so yes, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, they also were a major part of it. They purchased the home back in 1983 and held on to it until 2013, going through many attempts to get it on the National Register, which it was put on the National Register, and then also bringing the attention from the National Park Service down to look at the site and what it was and the national cultural significance of it. The Charles Young home, it was, of course, the place where he lived, the place where he would raise his family, but also that was his home. That was a place that no matter where he traveled throughout the entire world, that was always very, very special to him. And he loved the Wilberforce community. As I said before, Colonel Young lived in a very lonely space. He couldn't socialize with the officers and he couldn't socialize with his troops, but his home is where he was able to bring people together from all across different walks of life, different races, different everything. Some of the folks who have visited Colonel Young, whether he was in the home that he originally stayed in when he came to Wilberforce, or the house that we currently operate out of, or we did operate out of as a national park, like Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Haley Q. Brown. We have many influential African Americans that came there to that site. So the home right now is being preserved for, of course, for future generations. That's our motto in the National Park Service. And we will be open again back in, hopefully by next year. And I'll definitely let you know to come out and check it out again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Collins. Welcome back.
Hey,
So
sorry about that technology.
That's okay. I know. Yes, yes.
All
We were
right.
just asking
So
some
I
questions
appreciate
there.
y'all. All right, so we're just finish up. As that was Amos Lynch Plaza, you all can see the screen.
We don't see a screen
that
right
is
now
our-
for you. So if
Everyone's good?
do you want me to resend you the connection to open?
Yeah.
I'll
think
do
it
that
might have
real
been.
quickly.
I apologize, everyone.
Well, you're fine. I think
Yep,
after
totally
as long
fine.
as we've been doing these virtual events, we've all gotten used to the fact that every once in a while there's going to be a hiccup. So you should have the
Yeah.
box now to share your screen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get the full screen here. Okay. So
Perfect.
again, thank you all for your patience. This is our main corridor. I know Dr. Walsh had mentioned the great Amina Robinson. In our main corridor, we do have artwork from Amina. We also tell the history of Black Columbus in our hallways through the artists who were visual artists, performing artists, you name it, we honor them. As we continue on, this is our current exhibition. It's entitled Aurora, and it's by the artist Natalie Orr. The cool thing about Natalie Orr is that she was a student on a tour with our curator that some of you may know, Lynn Logan Grimes. And she had asked the students, hey, do we have any artists with the group? And her classmates like, Natalie. And from there, 6 months later, she had a piece in our exhibition. And then 6 years later, she has the full exhibition for Aurora. And that's in the Elijah Pierce Gallery, who is a well-known artist in our community, as well as a barber and a minister. So we're happy to have our gallery named after Elijah Pierce. Moving forward, this is how we honored Amina Robinson. We did class workshops last Saturday, which was, I guess, 2 Saturdays ago, February 19th, to honor Amina Robinson. She would have turned 82 years old this year. But with those classes, we were able to get local artists to do special projects in honor of Amina, and really taking a look at her great artistry and her resourcefulness, as a lot of the artists from Columbus, Ohio were very resourceful. You think of the name Smokey Brown, you think of Barbara Chavis, you name them. They were working together and creating some amazing art. As we opened up in March of 1987, we're located on the near east side of Columbus, one of the oldest areas of African-American life in the city. We occupy the site of the former Garfield Elementary School, and we have served as an anchor for development in the area since we opened up back in 1987. And we'd like to thank all of our partners in the area, the Columbus Urban League, the Ohio State University Extension Center, Maroon Arts Group, Lincoln Theater. The area of the King Lincoln District is growing. This is a photo of our MLK open house, and a special shout out to the Ohio History Connection, as we were able to do this MLK open house at the Ohio History Center. That is a dancer from the Leap of Faith Dance Company. So that's more information on how we program. We try to partner with everyone, especially back in 2020 when we were speaking to the social injustice. We created Heart of Protest, in which we galvanized pretty much over 30 arts organizations to create work or present work that was speaking out against the injustices that we've seen for far too long. Here is our permanent installation of Cargo, which depicts the conditions on slave ships. The artwork was done by Ron Anderson, and the carvings were done by Woodrow Nash. Pretty similar to what you would see in Cincinnati, but we have a small, area that is actually started by Cargo, but Goree Island, which depicts the conditions in the slave holding area. So that's on display every day at the King Arts Complex. This is a photo from our Juneteenth. We've been happy to do the citywide Juneteenth Festival for the past 2 years. So this is a great example of our community coming together. And over to the far right, you'll see the great Senator Herschel Craig participating in our community. This was a performance from the Choisan West African Dance Institute. So quick facts, we're the only performing and cultural arts institute named after Dr. King in the United States. We've hosted over 200 national known persons, artists, and celebrities at the facility. My first day, Jesse Jackson was there. I know when Dr. Walsh mentioned Harry Belafonte, I had the honor of meeting him. Then Senator Barack Obama was at the complex before he became president, Barack Obama. So it's just been an amazing support from, not only our community in Columbus, but national and international support. We've hosted so many regional conferences. We've done a lot in our 35 years. I was trying to keep it quick because I know I lost some time. That is our former mayor, Michael B. Coleman, along with the mayor of Accra, Ghana. And that was back in 2015, as it kind of marked that that is our sister city. So we are a sister city with Accra, Ghana, and the King Arts Complex is a sister theater of the National Theater of Ghana in Accra. So we're very proud of that, and we're looking forward to do more international programs and really to galvanize our Ghanaian population here in Central Ohio. So this kind of talks about even more highlights. You know, one of the big ones was our major exhibition, Three Legends, featuring Elizabeth Catlett, Jacob Lawrence, and Samela Lewis. That traveled from Columbus all the way to Germany. Also, our Great Heritage Music Festival. That's one of our amazing vocalists, Katina, in the community. And you can see the magnitude of this event, especially for those at Wilberforce. We had some of the home team. We had Lakeside here in 2019. So you can see the entire community came out. And when I get to look at these events and photos, it's just, you know, I have to pinch myself like, wow, I helped coordinate this event. But just major thanks to our executive director, Demetrius Nilly, and the entire team and our board for assisting us in our journey for the past 35 years of connecting community through the arts. Continuing on, 2008 was a big date. That was when, you know, President Obama first ran, and there was a Rock the Vote event at the complex, and we had celebrities, Beyonce, Jay-Z, P. Diddy, Mary J. Blige, and Russell Simmons at the King Arts Complex. That was an honor. I wasn't the performing arts director at that time, so I didn't get to meet them, but we're working on ways to get them back and to continue to support. We've also won a lot of awards from arts organizations locally, regionally, and nationally. If you haven't been by the King Arts Complex, we have our new auditorium and lobby. The renovations will be complete this spring, especially for our Heritage Music Festival, in which we overlook Mamie Moore Park. We've extended our patio, so it's really going to be attractive for those who rent out the Mamie Moore Park and may want to have a reception at the King Arts Complex. And as we continue on real quickly, I know I'm running out of time, how to support the arts in the community by making a gift, becoming a volunteer, attending an event, or becoming a member. We ask that you all log on to kingartscomplex.com for more information on how you can do that and how you can support the King Arts Complex. And real quickly, I'm going to showcase some of our great mural work and other permanent installations. This is our Heart of Protest mural. As I mentioned before, in 2020, we got all of the arts organizations to speak out through the arts. And you see this mural was created by 3 amazing visual artists, and you'll see people such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Amina Robinson, George Floyd, Mamie Moore, Trayvon Martin. Those people are all in that Heart of Protest mural, just showing that connective thread. As we continue on, the family, this is a sculpture that's in front of our building that was created by the artist Omar Shaheed. We also have a Cuba invocation figure by Andrew F. Scott. That's on our south side of our building. And then on the north side, we have another one of his works, the Nkandi invocation figure. Also, our African rainforest that was done by the amazing mural artist Walt Neal. Growing up in Columbus as I did as a youngster, when you saw murals on Cleveland Avenue or Livingston Avenue, more than likely it was a Walt Neal mural. Unfortunately, there's not too many still here in Columbus, so we're proud to have this in our newly renovated Nicholson Auditorium. And then you have our bust of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. By the Afro-American artist Elizabeth Catlett. It's one of, I believe, 2 in existence, so we're happy to have that in our lobby. And then, as I mentioned, the work from Amina Robinson, Timelessness of Life, Pages and Histories, talking about the life and times of the John T. Ward family. Their family led to opening up the E.E. Ward Transfer and Storage Company, which opened up in 1881, which is the longest continuously run Black business in the United States of America here in Columbus, Ohio. And then this is Amina basically illustrating growing up on Mount Vernon Avenue in the late 1900s. A lot of these places are iconic. And if you mention Byers Livery Stable, Tyler's Drugstore, for my mother who grew up on Mount Vernon Avenue, it just triggers a lot of memories, and just to show that great sense of community that took place on Mount Vernon Avenue and on Lund Street. And that's our logo, as we state, the connection to our community with the kente cloth, connecting our African heritage, and the circles are the windows of the community looking into the complex for programming and, you know, opportunities, and as well as us looking out the windows for artists and other opportunities to continue to educate, entertain, and inform our community. And coming up, our next exhibition is Daughter of the Thread, featuring the amazing artist Winnie Kendrick. The next exhibition reception opening will be Sunday, March 20th, and we're happy to partner with the Columbus Museum of Art and the Greater Columbus Arts Council for this event. You can see amazing artwork as displayed in the flyer there. So we definitely suggest you all check out our website, make a visit, give us a call, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're fine. Thank you so much for that very informative PowerPoint as well. And what are your hours as well, too, please, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, 8:30 to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Friday. We've had to make some adjustments with the pandemic, but I would just say give a call or check the website just in case if any of the hours change.
Okay, great. We do have a question for you from one of the audience attendees. Are there any programs or activities planned for Juneteenth this year at the King Arts Complex?
Yes, absolutely. I have a call at 2 p.m. today with the City of Columbus, and we're looking at how we'll present for Juneteenth this year. So stay tuned, like I said, to our website, sign up for our mailing list so you can get on our e-blast list. But yes, we plan to do that, and that's going to also be district-wide. So we're looking to partner with the Urban League, Maroon Arts Group, the Extension Center, and really make that a King Lincoln District effort annually.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Don't see any more questions. Dr. Walsh, Superintendent Stewart, do you all partner with Central State University, Wilberforce, the two HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, like on specific initiatives or programs, or just like kind of an as needed basis, or maybe student interns or anything like that? If you could speak on that, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'll start. We do partner with both, as well as Payne Theological Seminary and Wright State University, Cedarville. So like really those schools in that Miami Valley region, we have very, very good direct ties. And our focus is, and has been since I've been director, is like really to introduce a lot of our minority students to the field of public history, right? People are familiar with history itself, and becoming a historian for some people is pretty boring. I can tell you it's really not. But the field of public history itself, because it's so broad, most people don't really realize that like historic preservation falls under that. You know how like Mr. Collins works, that falls under public history as well. You're presenting the history in a more palatable way for the public, and those are important jobs for us because it gives our community a very strong and direct voice in bringing people into our history, bringing people into our culture, sharing that. So when we talk about some of the work that we're all doing, it's not even just national, but some of the international work that we're doing, you know, you get a firsthand glimpse at how people really view us as people within the context of the United States and how much we inspire them around the world. And that's why, you know, we partner with the universities, especially Central State University, in trying to build awareness of public history. And we're actually working with them to build a museum studies program so that we can get these students into the field and out there and like really doing the work that you see my colleagues doing, just on a higher level. We need so many more. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm here at Central State right now. This is my temporary office during the renovation. We partnered with Central State University, Wilberforce University, and through the Marauder Battalion ROTC, Cedarville and Wittenberg University as well. As previously stated, Colonel Charles Young started the Marauder Battalion ROTC, what became the Marauder Battalion ROTC. So those four schools make up the battalion, and they're actually our principal volunteers for everything we do here at the park. We also work with Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, as well as Payne Theological Seminary. So with Dr. Walsh being our neighbor, and you know, we partner with a lot of the same people in the community to get the job done. And it's a great partnership, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't think so. So let me see. One more question. Do either museum have archival material for World War I African-American soldiers trained at Camp Sherman in Chillicothe.
Now, we actually work really close with the Hopewell Culture National Historical Park, and that's where Camp Sherman was located during World War I. We have some archives through them, but as far as anything here at the park, we don't have anything specific to Camp Sherman, but we are able to get a hold of those documents and those files really easily.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, I can also add, we may have material related to that as well. If you were to go to ohiomemory.org, that's our online repository, and we're constantly adding new material to that. We digitize material from our archival collection, and that's going to be found. But again, we're constantly adding material. We're constantly processing, digitizing as quickly as possible. So check out the website, ohiomemory.org, the National Afro-American Museum from the drop-down menu, and peruse the collections. There could be something related to that there. If you don't see anything there, it doesn't mean we don't have it in our collection. It just means it hasn't been digitized and ready to share with the public just yet.
I just want to share one last thing. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our archival collection. We partnered with the Columbus Metropolitan Libraries, and we have a digitized collection. I apologize for saying too much. But we basically invite you all to log on to our website, but it's more of archivals of Columbus. And a lot of those photos were given to us by the aforementioned Amos Lynch, as a lot of those photos were in the call-in post. So we'll send that link along. So if there's any archival photos you're looking for from Columbus, we can provide that opportunity for you to check. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So with that, we thank each of you for your time, for your wonderful, informative presentations. Very informative. So hopefully our attendees got enough initial information to make them want to come visit. And we look forward to that. And now we will have a poem by our committee member, Tanya Todd with ODOT. So Tanya, please share your wonderful poem.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of our federal, state partners and the governor's office, and all of our ODOT co-workers near and far for taking time out of their busy schedules to celebrate Black History Month. We know everyone's schedule is busy, but we're glad that you were able to attend. With that spirit, I'm going to read a poem, I Dream a World by Langston Hughes. I dream a world where man, no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its path adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, no avarice blights our day. A world I dream where Black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free. Where wretchedness will hang its head and joy like a pearl attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world. Thank you very much, and we will try to play the video of Fort Hayes.